Hi, this is Pete from See Your Toes again, and this is podcast number 42, and I've kind of called it Getting Old, but it's more about how to not get old, how we can extend our life by taking actions that might make us live longer. What can we do to make us live longer? And more to the question even, why do we get old in the first place? What is making us old? It's easy to say, oh well, it's just something that happens. But to some people, getting old happens a lot faster than other people. And the question remains, how old could we get, assuming we don't get hit by a bus on the way through? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. It's getting old, how that can be made better, how it can be made so that we live longer, and I guess in the process live healthier as well, because there's no point living longer if we don't live healthier, because the last thing you want is to be old and stuck in bed dribbling and not coherent and not knowing what's going on. There's no fun in that life. It's just life for the sake of living. We want to be living and bouncing around and enjoying ourselves, enjoying company from others as we get older. Now, of course, a lot of people these days get old and die when they're only, even in their 70s, say. Now, I'm 60. I don't really want to think that I've only got less than 20 years left, which is kind of the purpose, I guess, of why I've decided to bring this up. Over the last couple of months, I've been reading a lot of books about age and how people get old. Incidentally, for example, the human body is designed apparently to live to up to 120 years. Now, very few people, of course, make it to there. So that's the first thing. If people can live to 120 years, but a lot of them are dying when they're 75, then there's something going wrong, obviously. Here's some interesting fun facts to start the conversation going, though. An albatross can live for 150 years. A lot of birds have quite long lives. A lot of parrots will live for well over 100 years, for example. So if an albatross can live for 150 years, what makes it different from other creatures? A rat, in comparison, has an old age lifespan of about 7 years. And an octopus, and this came as a bit of a surprise to me, because an octopus is quite a big creature and it's very intelligent. I've got a book all about octopuses. I thought they might be octopi, but apparently they're octopuses. And their cousins, the squid and the cuttlefish, they all live for about 3 years. And then they just start falling apart. It's like there's a time clock that says, right, your time is up, and they start to literally fall apart. And I guess once that starts to happen, then young Mr. Shark comes along and says, here's some delicious octopus for tonight's meal. So, getting back to us, what makes us live to 70? What could make us live to 120? That's the basis of today's podcast. Now, I've scribbled down a lot of notes today, and as anyone knows, when I make these podcasts, I will drift off lots and talk about other stuff, but I hope that my notes mean that I can actually find my way back to the end result. So, I'm going to start with not just here's a list of things that will make you live longer. I think that's kind of a bit boring if you don't understand the subject. And that's where I'm going to try to explain the subject in layperson terms, because the books I've been reading have been not layperson. They've been absolute bloody difficult, to be honest, because of all their scientific literature. So I'm in the process of trying to translate it. I guess that's what today is. It's translating what I've read and understood into words that most other people can understand. I did do a science-based degree many years ago and had to talk like this all the time, but those days are well gone. So we go right back to when Earth began, and at that stage, Earth was covered with a lot of water, H2O, water. But the problem was that there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. There was no ozone layer to protect the radiation, because at the moment we've got oxygen in the air and we've got an ozone layer across the top of the atmosphere, which keeps everything in, but the ozone also reacts with radiation from the sun, the UV rays, and chops a lot of them out. Incidentally, I'm from New Zealand. Most New Zealanders know that you don't stay out in the sun for very long, and that's the reason is because there's a hole in the ozone layer. They reckon it is getting smaller, but for a while there it was getting bigger, and that means because there's a hole in the ozone layer in New Zealand, if you're out in the sunshine for more than 10 or 15 minutes, you can easily get burned. And it's a real problem, of course, for tourists who go over there, especially the Brits. They always go over there looking a little bit pink because they're going from I am digressing here already. They go from a British winter to a New Zealand summer. They think this is great. They race down to the lovely sandy beach and they're swimming and having a great time, and they spend the next week in agony with basically third-degree burns from the sunshine. It's not nice. That's just a little word of caution. If you're planning on going for a holiday in New Zealand, slap on the sunblock. I'm not a big advocate of sunblock, but I did used to use it a lot in New Zealand, and it does help prevent that sort of sunburn, which is just not comfortable, and it's in such a short time, and that's because of the ozone layer depletion in the atmosphere. Now, the rest of the Earth has a big atmosphere of ozone. So I'll rephrase that. It has a big layer of ozone at the top of the atmosphere, and that stops radiation from coming into the Earth's surface. In them good old days, we're talking about billions of years ago, there was no oxygen in the air and there was no ozone layer, which is ozone is 3 oxygen atoms stuck together, which makes it quite a volatile little piece of machinery, versus oxygen, which is 2 oxygen atoms stuck together. So neither of those existed. Radiation poured down onto the Earth's surface. The Earth was covered in water, and effectively the water could be, through radiation, be oxidized to oxygen and hydrogen. Now, in that instance, the hydrogen, just stick with me for this. The hydrogen disappeared into the atmosphere because there was no ozone layer to hold it in. There was no atmosphere, so it just disappeared into outer space. And the oxygen accumulated, but got attacked by all sorts of other things like all the iron and manganese and sulfur and everything else that was around. So and then that turned into different chemicals. So the oxygen didn't hang around, it just got made into other stuff. And they reckon, this is where I'm getting at, this is one of the interesting fun facts I'm getting at, they reckon that Mars is red for the same reason. It had a lot of water on the surface. The water got oxidized down to oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen buggered off into outer space. The oxygen reacted with the iron that was in the soil, if you like, and that oxidized to iron oxide, which is the red color. This happened to all of the water on Mars, and that's why Mars is now dry and red, because all of the water converted to oxygen, which then got converted to ferrous oxides, iron oxides, which are red. There you go, a fun fact. So, in Earth, though, a lot of this water got converted to oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen buggered off into outer space. The oxygen got converted into things like it did on Mars with iron and sulfur and all these other chemicals. But then along came little creatures that managed to use photosynthesis to use that radiation energy and create oxygen in the process. And so it ended up that more oxygen was being produced than was being eaten up by all these chemical reactions and by volcanoes spewing out more sulfur and everything else. And so with all these planktons that were in the ocean, oxygen in the atmosphere started building up to extent that we ended up with oxygen as we kind of know it now. Not so much, but a little bit like we know it now. And then some of that oxygen went further up and created the ozone layer. Once the ozone layer was formed, then we weren't having the same problems with radiation, and so then life forms could start getting better. Now, and this is really important, and I am getting somewhere here. So then there was a big sort of like bacteria, that decided to eat a little bacteria. We didn't really eat him, he absorbed him. I'm saying him, I'm being sexist. And that little bacteria was the precursor for what is now mitochondria. If you've listened to my podcast before, you've heard me go on about mitochondria. And they are little critters that live in every cell in the world, apart from bacteria and a couple of and some cancers. So every tree, every plant, every grass, every human, every animal, every spider, every bat, everything on Earth that is multicellular has these little mitochondria in them. In the early days, right back when this happened, it was a lovely symbiotic relationship because the bacteria that consumed the mitochondria kind of thing, that bacteria didn't like oxygen. Nothing liked oxygen. Oxygen is a toxic chemical. It didn't like oxygen, but it was being forced more and more to live in oxygen environments. The little mitochondria could use oxygen to make energy. So it became a good symbiotic relationship because the mitochondria was being protected by the bigger creature that it was now inside. And the bigger creature had all of this, well, it had two things. It had the removal of oxygen, which was a nasty chemical that would attack it. And it would also get energy in the form of what the mitochondria spewed out. So it was a real good relationship. And one thing led to another, and next thing there were multicellular organisms, and all of these organisms had mitochondria in them, right to present day, where you have mitochondria in just about every cell in your body. And those mitochondria produce all the energy that keeps you going during the day. So when your heart's pumping, it's the mitochondria are giving the muscles in your heart the energy to pump. When you stand up and walk around, it's the mitochondria in your muscles that are giving you the energy to do that. Now, this is really important because this mitochondria caper, these little critters that are inside, they reckon there's about 100 roughly in every cell in your body, which means there's trillions of them in your body, all up. And it's these mitochondria are the basis of life on Earth, and they're also the reason, or one of the reasons, why you get old and die. Incidentally, while I'm on mitochondria, this is not necessarily directly related to us getting old, but it's just another interesting fun fact. All of the mitochondria inside your body came from your mother. Now, this is important, of course, because everything else, like your DNA, came from, and you don't have to be a geneticist to know this, your DNA, which is your coding, which is your blueprint for being alive, half of it came from your father and half of it came from your mother. With mitochondria, all of the mitochondria inside you came from your mother. And this goes back to, and it's actually the basis of sex as we know it, as in why all of these creatures and all of the plants and just about everything on the world, apart from those little bacteria, which are single-celled organisms, just about everything else has sex as its reproductive cycle. So it has males and females. Yes, there are hermaphrodites, there is asexual reproduction sometimes, all that. Let's skip all that. And well, as far as us humans are concerned especially, and most plants have boy bits and girl bits. Even on a flower, you have a flower has girl bits on it and boy bits on it, and the boy bits are the pollen. They get picked up by a bee, for example, and then the bee wanders over the girl bit and pollinates the girl bit. Or he flies off, or the bee flies off to another flower of the same species and wanders over that, and then, of course, again, the pollen gets distributed around and the girl bits get pregnant and create seeds. So they're pretty much the same as us, except, of course, they're plants and we're humans, but the process isn't too dissimilar. So with us humans, you've got an egg. If you're a woman, you've got an egg inside you. And if you're female and of the right age, you'll have eggs inside you. An egg is ready to be fertilized. It sits there down in your ovaries. The sperm gets put inside your body and off it goes. There's thousands and thousands of little tadpoles rushing like mad to get to that egg. And then the tadpoles, one of those tadpoles will reach the egg, manage to get through the egg shell, if you like, the outer egg, and produce, and then mix it up with the female cell and then start dividing, and next thing you know, you've got the start of a new life form in the form of a baby. Now, with the mother egg, she could have mitochondria in that egg, and they can just sit there and do their thing. And it's even been shown that the mitochondria in the egg have been there basically since that mother was first created as well. So the mitochondria that are in the egg are brand spanking new. They're not mitochondria that have been sitting around in mum actively working for the last 20 or 30 years when they could have been damaged from any sort of environmental factor or whatever, which we're going to talk about later. So the mitochondria in your egg have been there since day one of mum being a female. I find that quite amazing. So those mitochondria, and there's lots of them in the egg, are sitting there waiting. The egg, of course, gets ready. Young Mr. Sperm gets thrown in there and he manages to get all the way up to the egg. Now, he has mitochondria in him, and the mitochondria are there to produce energy so that he can wiggle like mad, like a tadpole, up to the egg. Without the mitochondria, he'd have no energy. So he has to have energy to do that voyage to the egg. But by the time he gets to the egg, the mitochondria are pretty shagged. He gets through the egg and fertilizes the egg, and then the egg starts reproducing. So the one cell from the boy and the one cell from the girl get jiggy with it and produce two cells, which produce 4 cells and then 8 cells and so on. And life creates. But the mitochondria that were in the boy it's believed don't get transferred, or if some of them gets transferred, it's also believed that they will die out early, or they will just never have the population of the girl mitochondria. So every time the cell divides, there's lots and lots of mitochondria from the mum, and there's practically no, or very, very few as a percentage, mitochondria from the boy. So all of your mitochondria, pretty much, if not all, are from your mum. That's just an interesting fun fact. I do think that's interesting, even if you don't. So then the egg gets produced and it starts to grow, and of course you end up with a baby, hopefully 9 months later. Now, if you think of that baby then, at that stage, if the baby doesn't have genetic predisposition to dying early, then it can be expected to live for 120 years. It's thought that the reason why it's 120 years and not the albatross's 150 years or the rat's 7 years is all to do again with genetics. So it's thought that the human body is designed, as are all other creatures in the world, the human body is designed to last for a certain amount of time. Now, in rats, they breed quickly. Like in mice, I believe it's 6 weeks or something before a little mouse can get pregnant and start having more babies. But if you think of, say, the rat, let's stick to the rat. The rat is youngster, it's adolescent, which happens pretty quickly. Next thing, it's pregnant. It's got 7 kids in its belly, and so they pop out. Then a few weeks later, of course, say 2 months later, some of them, the girl ones, can get pregnant and they can produce another 7 or 8 babies. So there's this proliferation. You know, the number of babies that can be produced are quite astounding. If that rat was to live for 100 years, then there'd be a hell of a population explosion, and the problem is there wouldn't be enough food for all of the rats, and so on. It appears that the lifespan of a species is dependent upon, and this again I think is a little bit interesting, it's dependent upon the rate at which the species breeds. And so for humans it's normally 1 per year or 2 years. So if you're having one baby for every 2 or 3 years, for example, then that's different from the rat who has 7 babies every few months. And so the rat tends to age a lot quicker, and it's thought that that's an ecological thing, that it's not about years, it's all about cells and how quickly the cells are used and all of the burdens that are put on them, and then before they basically die of, well, they get all sorts of problems and eventually kind of die of old age, which we'll talk about soon. So the human is designed to last a lot longer than the rat because we breed slower, and that breeding acts as a time clock as to how long we can last. It's why, for example, apparently why women, when they reach their mid to late 40s or their early 50s, become menopausal. At that stage, they have stopped producing eggs, so they're no longer breeding. And so from the species point of view, you think, well, if you're no longer breeding, from the species point of view, you don't have any useful input anymore. You're not extending the species. You're just living without having any input. Of course, for people, that's different, especially for women who reach menopause and then get older, because they are looking after the grandchildren. And so they have a purpose. And this is, I know it sounds all very la-di-da, but this is what scientists believe is the situation based on humans versus lots of other animals. That the human mother becomes menopausal and then she becomes the grandmother. And of course, while mum's pregnant, she's out of action to a certain degree for several months. Then she's looking after a baby for several months, because we, of course, grow very slowly compared with other animals. You look at an antelope has the baby, and within a couple of hours at best, that baby is up on its legs running around following the herd. You can imagine a human baby pops out and mum saying, "Come on, kid, hurry up, get walking, we've got things to do." It just doesn't happen. So the mum needs looking after as much as the baby does, and so that's what grandma's for. And so she can expect to live for another 30, maybe 40 years, and then after a while, of course, disease and stuff will catch up with her and she'll die of what we would call old age. In the meantime, Dad has been producing sperm all this time, but after a certain age, I guess the sperm that he's creating may not be as healthy as it used to be. And then it gets to a stage where the man is actually a bit of a burden. He's not looking after the children. He's not looking after the grandkids. He's probably at an age where he's not really helping a hell of a lot with hunting and gathering, because this is all back when we were hunters and gatherers. And so men tend to have a much lower age span than women. And that's why this is predicted, is because the man basically at that stage isn't of any particular use to the species, and so at that stage various metabolic things kick in to make him die of old age. It sounds a bit gruesome when you put it like that, but it also makes sense. You can think, it sounds a bit airy-fairy, but it's been proven, and it would appear that there's in the human body, it's amazing, and this, I've said this before, there are so many hormones, so many enzymes, so many this, that, and the next thing, and they all, each one of them has a particular activity inside your body. And then there's like a hormone, for example, that has an activity, and then there's an opposite hormone that works against that hormone, and so they all keep each other in balance. And those hormones, of course, change as we get older. So when you're a kid, you don't have a lot of testosterone, but you get to adolescence, suddenly testosterone is all through your body, because that's the stage where you're expected to start breeding. And same with girls, and then, of course, they start being able to produce babies. And so their hormones change. And then as you get to menopause, or as a man gets older, then the testosterone potentially drops down, the egg making potentially drops down, and again, all of your hormones in your body change. So your hormones are changing all the time, and that's why these scientists believe that this is part of the aging process, of course, as your hormones change around, and some of those hormones will affect your ability to cope with other external and internal stresses, which we're about to talk about. So that was all called the optimal evolutionary lifespan, and that's where the albatross's optimal evolutionary lifespan is 150 years, the rat's is 7 years, and the humans is supposedly up to 120 years. Incidentally, anyone who thinks a rat and a bat are similar, the bat apparently can live, I think it was about 30 years, so it can live a hell of a lot longer than a rat. Also, a rat can produce vitamin C inside its body, whereas a bat can't. Same with us. We can't produce vitamin C inside our bodies. We have to eat it. So there's a bit of a difference between a rat and a bat. That's all I'm saying. So all of that is supposedly our genetics, keeping our genetics alive, because everything rotates in ecology. Everything really rotates around keeping the genetic line alive. Everything is about throwing that genetic line into the next generation. So yes, our generation is supposed to be here to enjoy ourselves and have a life, but that life, in the scheme of things, is finite, because at some stage we need to bugger off so that the next generation can survive. If you can imagine, if we all live for, say, 300 or 400 years, then you'll have all these oldies wandering around, and there wouldn't be enough food going around for a start, and especially if you're a hunter-gatherer, it wouldn't take long before everything just became one hell of a mess. And so that's why supposedly the genetics are designed so that once you have done your useful life, then at that stage you're done for, so that people following in future generations can carry on. So then it gets down to the actual cells. What's happening inside your body that makes you old? Now, it appears that there are 2 or 3 main things that make you old, make me old. One of them is oxidative stress, and this all comes back to oxygen that we talked about at the start. Your cells don't like oxygen, and there's a real irony to that, because we have to have oxygen to live. If we stop having oxygen, if you put a plastic bag over your face, then you don't get oxygen, and you'll take maybe 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute, probably 30 seconds to go unconscious, and if you still don't get oxygen for another few minutes, you'll die. Oxygen is imperative to human life, and it's imperative to just about all life on the planet, on Earth, with the exception of a few anaerobic bacteria and stuff. Anaerobic means that they can live without oxygen. They live, for example, if you have a swamp or a pond or something that stinks, then that's anaerobic bacteria working, and instead of using oxygen to create food, they're using sulfur and other chemicals to create food. That's why a stinky swamp smells sulfurous. There are also anaerobic bacteria, incidentally, in your gut. Way down in your bowels, there's no air down in your bowels, there's no oxygen, and so those bacteria that are working like mad, reducing the food you've eaten, getting extracting more nutrients and stuff, which is really important for us, because then we can absorb those nutrients. Those bacteria are also anaerobic, they don't need oxygen. The rest of us do need oxygen to survive, but at the same time, all of the cells in our body don't want oxygen. Our skin is designed to keep oxygen out. It also, of course, is designed to keep moisture in so that we don't dehydrate really fast. We all know we sweat, so it's also there to obviously we have to keep ourselves at a certain temperature, so it gets a bit tricky. But our skin keeps oxygen out. We breathe oxygen in through our mouth. It goes down to our lungs, and our lungs extract the oxygen from the air and put it into our bloodstream via our hemoglobin. And then it's transported to wherever it needs to go, right down to the end of your finger or to the end of your toe or to your brain or to your heart. It gets transported in hemoglobin. It doesn't just go in as oxygen and get sent through your body as oxygen, because oxygen is toxic and that would attack all sorts of stuff, and the oxygen wouldn't get to your end finger because it would have got changed along the way. So that's why it's put into a hemoglobin cell and then transported to other ends of your body. It's just amazing that we need oxygen so desperately to survive, and literally with a couple of minutes of no oxygen, you're dead, and yet oxygen is toxic to your body. Talk about playing with fire. So oxygen gets all the way to your cell. It gets transported into your cell, still locked up, and then it gets to your mitochondria, and the mitochondria will then use oxygen through chemical process to create energy. Now, during that chemical process, and this is where we're getting to, during that chemical process, there are some what are called free radicals or oxidants that are created. Now, these free radicals can be peroxide, hydrogen peroxide, or they can be hydroxyl ions. And you don't need to remember all of that. It's just that these free radicals are little bastards, and they will attack all sorts of things because they're reactive. Hence, they're called free radicals. They're reactive. And they will react with all sorts of stuff inside your body. Now, as a mitochondria just goes about its daily processes, every now and again, some of these little free radicals will be released, and they will run around and want to oxidize with anything they can get hold of. Now, if they oxidize with the right chemical, then that's fine. They can be reused. If they don't, they can attack proteins. They could attack DNA. They could attack all sorts of things. They could attack anything that's closest to them because they don't want to be in their reactive state. They want to get back to being neutral. That's just what chemistry is all about. So if you imagine this happening in every cell of your body every now and again, then over the days, weeks, months, years, decades, and you have these little things that are attacking the odd protein here and the odd bit and piece here and causing a bit of grief there, then over the time, of course, you're going to have oxidative damage. And this oxidative damage is one of the things that helps us get old. Now, incidentally, if you think, well, that's easy, I'm going to take antioxidants. I'm going to take an antioxidant from my health food shop, and that's going to fix that problem, and I'm going to live forever. It's been shown that antioxidants that you consume through eating do bugger all as far as this process is concerned, because they can't get all the way into the cell and into the mitochondria to do their job where the actual problems are. They can do a bit of antioxidizing around the rest of your body, but not where it's required. So antioxidants have been shown, although there was a big hype to have them, how much they were wonderful. It would appear that most of all that wonderful information that came out about antioxidants was actually kind of made up, and none of it was actually true. Sounds familiar. And so health foods and pharmacies and stuff did really well out of selling lots of antioxidants to people, but the antioxidants did practically nothing. So you've got all of these oxidized chemicals running around in your body, and they're what are helping cause aging because they attack all sorts of stuff. They could attack the neighboring cell. They could attack all sorts of stuff. There are, incidentally, lots of antioxidants, though, that your body produces. So your body already produces all of these little enzymes that run around, and their job is to grab these little oxidized elements, these hydroxyls and peroxides, grab them and do something about them. So we already have antioxidants in our bodies doing that job. But if they don't work fast enough, or just as time goes by, you get a little bit of slippage here and there, then that oxidizing will slowly build up to affect you in as much as it breaks down all of these little bits and pieces. It'll break a protein down here and cause this problem, and it might break that cell there. And yet after a while, these little mitochondria, they get old and they start producing more and more of these baddies, and less. It's like anything. As they get older, their efficiency, their productivity is reduced, and their problems that they're creating increases. It's one of the reasons why, as we get older, we need to really look after our health, because our health can directly help make more mitochondria, and we're going to talk about that shortly. So that's oxidation. That's oxidation at the mitochondrial level of when oxygen is needed to be produced to manufacture energy, which is happening inside your body this very second en masse. It's just millions and millions of little reactions right now inside your body. And of those millions and millions of little reactions, some of them won't be going quite as planned. And if you've got old mitochondria doing this, then you can expect that more and more of these oxidized little particles are going to be getting produced. So that's the first one, is oxidation, and it's at the mitochondrial cellular level. The second one is called glycation, and this is produced from glucose inside your body. Glucose is a form of sugar. If you have high blood sugar, then you're going to have a lot of glycation potentially happening. For those of you who eat meat, you know if you fry a steak, one of the yummy bits about a fried steak is that on the outside of the steak it gets all brown, and that sort of caramelizes, and when you're eating it, that caramelizes. It's a bit like an onion too. You know that an onion, when you fry that, it becomes brown and it caramelizes, and that's why a fried onion tastes so much nicer than a raw onion. It's because of this caramelization. That's what's happening inside your body. You're not frying your body, but it's the same action that's happening inside your body, which causes this glucose, the sugar, to be glycated into a brown gluggy mess. I'm not saying your blood's going to turn into a brown gluggy mess, but you're going to have all of these little things floating around inside your body from the glucose that's being oxidized. And so if you can have, this is the first little tip, I'm always going on about a low sugar diet, and so if you're reducing how much sugar you have in your bloodstream, then automatically you're reducing this chance of glycation. You're reducing the chance of the likes of diabetes, and diabetes is because of insulin, and insulin, or the problems of insulin, are because of the glucose in your bloodstream. So if you can get rid of glucose in your bloodstream, it's doing you a hell of a load of good. But one of those ways is because of glycation, so you're getting rid of that problem. The third way is from inflammation. So inflammation is a funny thing, because when you bang your knee on the table as you walk past, and you start swearing and cursing because that really hurt, and then you get a bruise, and the bruise is where blood has escaped from the cells, and so then your knee may slightly inflame, it may get swollen, and that's all the body's way of trying to help it get fixed. So then when it's inflamed, it's getting more blood flowing through that area of your body, and so the more blood can get more hormones and more enzymes and everything else in there, all the mop-up products, and they're going to get rid of the broken cells. They're going to reduce all the broken cells down, send them off to the wreckers. They're going to start manufacturing new cells and fix everything up. All the little capillaries that got broken, they're going to need to be mended and so on. So there's a big thing going on. Now that's all inflammation, and that inflammation is acute, meaning that, of course, it's for that moment and it's important. Now inflammation, when it's acute like that, we need it. We need anywhere that your body is being attacked by bacteria or viruses and stuff will cause inflammation, and that acute inflammation is really important because it's our body's way of responding, and the body will send all sorts of enzymes and hormones and all sorts of stuff into those locations to fix that problem. When the inflammation becomes chronic, though, in other words, the inflammation is for a long time, then things start really going tits up. Because that long time inflammation has the same effects as the short-term inflammation, except that it's obviously for a long term. And so whereas short-term inflammation was good in as much as it helped fix damaged cells, when it's a long-term inflammation, it becomes a real problem. And there's all sorts of enzymes and hormones again released, and they will do a lot of damage to your body. So long-term inflammation or chronic inflammation is really bad. It's one of the three bad things. You've got the oxidization from your mitochondria not doing their job properly. You've got glycation from sugar inside your bloodstream causing grief. And then you've got inflammation, chronic inflammation. And so Chronic inflammation, again, of course, can be because your heart's struggling, or, for example, you could have, incidentally too, while I remember, there's an oxidation happening, is with your cholesterol. So everyone says, oh, you've got high cholesterol, that's bad. What is bad about cholesterol is when cholesterol, the little LDL cholesterols, get oxidized, which is that oxidation word we mentioned before. They get oxidized and they become VLDLs, very low density lipoproteins. And then it's those little oxidized LDLs, oxidized cholesterol, that get into your veins, into your arteries, between the arterial walls, and start building up, and that creates the plaques that end up creating your problems with your fat building up in your arteries. And that's all because of oxidized LDL. And that's why I keep banging on that it's not because of cholesterol. Cholesterol is a good thing. It's so good. It's when that cholesterol is being oxidized. What's causing the oxidation? Sugar. Sugar, and having high blood sugar, is causing the oxidation in your cholesterol, which is causing the problem. So, ways we can help fix ourselves from this dilemma. The first one is to try to remove the oxidative stress. Now, that can be done by helping remove the damaged old mitochondria, and one way of doing that is anything that can relate positively to your health, such as exercise. Exercise stimulates more mitochondria to be produced to put up with the excess energy that you're using, and that's why you'll get fitter as you do more and more jogging and so on. That's because, among other things, your mitochondria, you're producing more mitochondria that can produce more energy for your cell, and also the cell is becoming more efficient at its operation. So exercise is a good way to start off with. A second way is, incidentally, something like vitamin C. And whereas people thought vitamin C was an antioxidant, it's been proven that it probably doesn't do too much inside your cells in the antioxidant category, but it does help get fat molecules across your mitochondrial wall. So it's thought that vitamin C is actually quite important for that reason, and so having vitamin C can help make your mitochondria healthier. Having saturated fats and unsaturated fats in your body can also be a good thing, because again, these are what are inside the mitochondria. Effectively, the fluid that's inside each of these little tiny critter mitochondria is fats. It's fats that are inside them. It's the same with your brain. Your brain has a whole lot of lipids in there, and cholesterol is a form of fat and protein mixed together. So you've got a whole lot of reasons why you should be eating fat, and not just thin fats, not just oils, but some of the thicker fats as well. It would appear that some of those thinner fats, when the mitochondria isn't working well and is oxidizing too much, it's the thinner fats that can easily be oxidized, whereas the thicker fats offer more of a challenge to being oxidized. So that can help mitochondria as well. Eating more fats. I have mentioned that once or twice before. More fats, less bloody carbohydrates. As we've mentioned before, if you can reduce your glucose and your blood sugar, then that's going to cause a whole lot less oxidation, which is going to cause a whole lot better lifespan for your mitochondria and hopefully make them healthier. And the other big thing is apparently just stress, believe it or not, something as simple as stress. It's believed that stress, of course, creates all sorts of hormonal problems inside your body, and those hormones can speed up this whole process of oxidation in your mitochondria. They're just changing all of your hormonal basis around. So if you can reduce your stress, I know it's easier said than done, relax more, try to get your brain in the right place, then that will help. And it's been thought that a lot of the centenarians, am I saying that right, in places like Japan, where there's lots of people in their 100s, if they're all spoken to, they all have seem to have a very low stress level in their lives, and it's thought that that could and did have throughout their lives, and it's thought that that could be quite a bit to do with why they live longer than most other people. So if you can reduce your stress, it would probably help considerably. Reduce stress, exercise more. So this leads me to one other thing I wanted to talk about today, and it was something that was really interesting in the book I read this morning, and that was all about which came first, the chicken or the egg. And this also comes back to what we were talking about before with evolution, with having boys and girl eggs and boy sperm and so on. So apparently, when we were amphibians, that's like frogs and stuff, they're amphibians. They've got a soft skin and they're designed to live in swamps and things, and that's what happened. And then there was a period in Earth's history when all those swamps started drying up a little bit, and so the amphibians were kind of forced into climbing up out of the water, and at that stage they developed a scaly skin to protect them from drying out. And the eggs, which used to be dropped in water, like if you think of a frog's egg, if you don't know about frogs and stuff, you're about to learn. A frog lays its eggs in the water, and then the female frog lays her eggs in the water, and then the boy frog comes along and squirts sperm all over them, and the sperm have to work like mad to get to those eggs to fertilize them. Now that's all fine and dandy if you've got lots of swampy water to live in, but once your water starts to dry out, then you have to come up with plan B. Plan B was to climb onto land, and of course this didn't happen in a generation, this was over millions of generations. The amphibians climbed onto the earth, onto dry land, and grew scales to protect them from drying out. And also those eggs, though, then had to get a hard shell on them because they were going to be above ground. They needed a hard shell, otherwise they're just going to dehydrate and become nothing. So you had to put a hard shell around an egg so that it could survive the climate, the lack of water. How do you get a hard-shelled egg fertilized? You have to fertilize it before it becomes a hard-shelled egg. And so when the hard-shelled egg is still in the womb of the mum, that's when it needs to be fertilized, hence sex as we know it. So at that stage, instead of the male coming along and just squirting sperm all through the water and hoping that some of that sperm gets to the egg that's floating in the waterweed, suddenly the boy has to put his sperm inside the female so that the female gets pregnant while the egg is still in her, and then she can lay the egg, and the egg has already got a hard shell on it, and off it goes. And so that's where sexual reproduction as we know it, as in a boy with his bits and a girl with her bits, and the girl has her egg inside her, and the boy needs to put his sperm inside the girl to get her pregnant. That's the basis of sexual reproduction. I think that's it's just these little things like that. So anyway, and it comes down to what comes first, the chicken or the egg. On that basis, it's quite evident that the egg came first. The chicken is a result of the egg, and someone can say, oh, but the egg's a result of the chicken. But if you go back far enough, that egg, and this is important too with regard to genetics, like I said before, in your body you've got DNA that came from your father and DNA that came from your mother. Now, the chicken has a set of DNA. So the mother chicken has got her set of DNA. But the egg that's inside her and has been fertilized has got DNA from her and DNA from the boy chicken that mated with her. So at that stage, the egg is a different being from the mother. The egg has got DNA from two living beings, whereas the mother has got DNA from just herself. And that's why the egg came first. The egg has got the DNA from both animals, and so then when the egg hatches, that chicken has got the DNA from both of those animals. But before the egg was created, the mother just had the DNA like that. And that's how sometimes you can get new species, of course. If this, my father used to breed birds, and if you matched, for example, a canary with a finch, it was possible that a canary and a finch could breed. Or here's another one that most other people know. What happens when you breed a horse with a donkey? You create a mule. And it was the same with the canary finch babies. They would be mules. So it meant that you could have a baby, just like a mule, but the mule, as the name implied, never bred. It can't breed. It is unbreedable. So that's an example where two species get together and jiggy and what happens. So that is possible. But if you have two very alike animals, it might be two animals that look very much like a chicken, but they're not quite a chicken yet. And then they go and get jiggy. The egg that's produced has got the blueprint from both of those animals, and then when it hatches out, oh, it's a chicken. And that's how the egg comes first, not the chicken. Right, I have probably bored you long enough. So the moral of the story is, if you want to live longer, here's a few things that you, in my opinion, would help. And this is for me as well. This is as much for me as anyone else. I'm 60. I don't want to die of old age in the near future. I want to live as long as I can, on the proviso that my life is healthy and I'm not lying in a bed slobbering and I don't know anybody around me and I'm basically just living because I'm a bunch of cells that are staying alive, but my brain gave up ages ago. Oh, incidentally, Alzheimer's disease is often thought of as an old age disease, and it would appear that just about all of us will get out, if we live long enough, will get Alzheimer's. But how quickly you get Alzheimer's is a result of all of these other things that happen, especially inflammation, chronic inflammation, and your body's ability to overcome that chronic inflammation. And incidentally, Alzheimer's disease has been shown to be directly resulting from too much blood sugar for too long. Again, a chronic situation of the glycation effect, where you've got too much blood sugar in your system for too long, becomes chronic. It's why a lot of people with diabetes are more prone to get heart disease and stroke and everything else. It's all to do with sugar. So, my takeout from all of this is, number one, if you're not already doing it, exercise. The more exercise you do, the more mitochondria, something that's going to get your heart rate up, your blood moving through your body. And so your mitochondria have to work a little bit harder to produce energy, and so your body will start adapting. And one of the ways is your mitochondria will start reproducing. Mitochondria can reproduce inside your cells. They can divide. Apparently they can even sort of stick themselves together and two mitochondria become one. They're smart little buggers. They live completely separately as far as the cell is concerned. They live completely separately from the cell. They're like squatters, but they're producing all the energy that you need to survive, so you can't go and evict them. That wouldn't work. Evicting mitochondria will not help. Anything that will make mitochondria divide and be healthier is going to be good, and anything that can help break bad mitochondria down will also help. Now, one of the things, incidentally, that was discussed in the book was calorie restriction, and it's been shown that calorie restriction can affect longevity. And I think this is the same reason. I think it's because it didn't really come up with a reason why calorie restriction helped. It just said it did. I think it's because of the same process as fasting. If you go for a 24 or a 48 or even a 72-hour fast, effectively your body can't get food from its surroundings. You're not eating. So therefore your body says, right, I'm going to go and I'm going to start breaking down all the shitty broken cells inside my body, all of the organelles. Mitochondria is an organelle. It's a little thing inside another thing. And so a bit of a spring cleaning happens, and it's been shown. This is called autophagy. It's all about breaking down old stuff and using all of the nutrients and all of the building blocks to create new stuff. And this is exactly what happens when you're fasting. So after your body starts running out of food, it goes off and makes new food. Incidentally, your body will be breaking down your body fats, and that's why you don't lose energy. You don't just come to a grinding halt because your body ends up having... I've done a 2-day fast, 48 hours, and at the end of that 48 hours, I was bouncing off the walls with the amount of energy I had. So it was because the body was breaking down the fats for energy, and then in the meantime, though, it was a great spring clean. I didn't feel any different, but it was a great spring clean because while my body was not eating, it was running around finding all those broken cells and getting rid of them. And it's thought that that process alone can help reduce the likelihood of things like cancer, where cells are going a little bit haywire, starting to get a mind of their own, and that autophagy can help break those down as well. So having a fast can really help. It can help hugely. Think about it as your spring clean. Every time you go into your room and you think, man, I need to get rid of some of these clothes. I keep buying new clothes, but I really need to get rid of some of these old clothes, my undies with holes in them and my socks with holes in them. And I've got how many bloody t-shirts and I only wear 5 of them. I know I'm going to go through my t-shirts and get rid of all of the t-shirts I don't wear, and I'm going to take them off to the charity shop. And that's what fasting is doing inside your body. It's saying, right, all of you cells, you're doing a good job. All of you cells are doing a shit job. You're unhealthy. You're basically not helping the system at all. And so we're going to break you down and reuse all of your nutrients. And that's what fasting does. And I think that's the same as when the book talks about calorie restriction. I think that's what it's doing. The calorie restriction, of course, is happening all of the time, whereas fasting is happening once in a while. But fasting will have much greater effects than calorie restriction, where your body's thinking, well, I've kind of got enough food, I've just got to be really thrifty with it. I think calorie restriction will also reduce how much blood sugar is floating around in your body, so it goes back to that glycation thing as well. So exercise is great, fasting is great. Get rid of your sugar. Get rid of as much sugar out of your life as possible. The whole basis of every podcast I've done, even the mental health people, the guests have come on, the way they fix their mental health problems, their illnesses like bipolar and depression and even schizophrenia, was to get the sugars out of their life. It was the sugars that were creating a lot of those mental health problems. If you can get rid of sugars out of your life, you're going to be a whole lot better. And then eat plenty of healthy fats, and I do believe that includes saturated fats, lots of healthy fats. It's been shown, for example, with Alzheimer's patients that coconut oil has got a massive effect on people with Alzheimer's and people with especially early onset Alzheimer's, with their ability to reinstate some of the memory that they've lost. And it's amazing. And that's just from coconut oil, which is a saturated fat, has particular benefits to it. So that's another little hack then, is why not add some coconut oil to your life? Don't cook it if you can, because although coconut oil is a good cooking thing, when you heat it up like that, it's probably going to start breaking down some of its things. But if you can chuck coconut oil into any of your foods, that would be great. Also, vitamin C. Have a vitamin C tablet, not for its antioxidant properties, but because we know that vitamin C is really handy in other instances, like I said before, where it helps get a fat molecule across the mitochondrial wall. So have vitamin C. Vitamin E is also something that the book certainly talks about. And the book, incidentally, is called Oxygen, the Molecule That Made the World, by a chap called Nick Lane, Nicklane. Now, Nick is obviously a very intelligent man, but a word of warning, this book is very hard to read in as much as it is quite scientific. He does try to break it down so that the layperson can understand it, but even then it is a slow read. But the book is extremely interesting if you're into all of this biology stuff at a chemical level. Warning, it is very chemical level, very genetics level, and all that sort of stuff. So that's Nick Lane, Oxygen, the Molecule That Made the World. I got mine from Amazon. And there's been other books I've read, but this is the primary one that talks about the effects that oxygen has on basically life, and how life on Earth has been created by oxygen, but at the same time, life on Earth has learnt how to defend itself from oxygen. And that is another paradox. It's an amazing difference that we are surviving in an oxygen world, and yet we need oxygen just to survive. Anyway, I'm babbling. So I hope you all have a good day and stay well and safe, and hopefully there's been something that you've got out of this. If nothing else, it might just help you think about exercise and knocking down that sugar, increasing your fats, and looking after yourself, and try not to be too stressed. Wouldn't that be nice? All right, have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Stay well. Thank you. Bye-bye.